All right, for more on the developments, we have our guest Andrew Leung, strategic affairs expert, as well as Irfan Nuruddin, a professor of Indian politics, Georgetown University. Thank you to both of us for joining us on this important discussion and what Trump's presidency could mean to the world at large. I'll start with you, Mr. Nuruddin, first. So to you, how will the geopolitical affairs play out now that Trump has made a comeback in the White House? What will be the impact on the Middle Eastern as well as Ukraine-Russia battle?
So is it addressed to me? Hello?
Yes.
Are you addressing me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that this election, contrary to early predictions of a nail-biting close fight, in fact, that the Trump campaign sails to its dramatic victory. Not only has he achieved 295 electoral votes, much more than the threshold of 270, but he has gained something like 4.7 million popular votes than Harris. What is more, Trump is achieving a comfortable majority in both the Senate and the House. So, and then, of course, Trump is already being reported to be drenching the swamp, as it were, by vetting the federal bureaucracy for loyalty to himself, regardless of merits otherwise. And with the appointment of a Trump faithful cabinet, and he would have, well, in addition to installing Republican-friendly high court judges for life, so when he comes to the White House, he would have unchecked restraints, and he would be like an American emperor for the next 4 years. But this reflects a deep-seated division in the American body politics, because a lot of the, in spite of apparent bright spots for the economy, in the stock market, but the vast majority of the voters feel that this apparent bright spots in the economy are only for the elite, whereas his supporters are mostly non-university educated and agricultural workers, especially in the swing states. They do not see that their life had turned any better under the Biden administration. And then they are buying into his rhetoric, blaming it on outsourced production, and also illegal immigrants competing for jobs and housing. So I think that this really reflects a transformation of American politics. Now, if you look at foreign policy, Trump is, because of his ingrained psyche as a businessman, he's focusing on money and also transactions. And then looking at from his behavior or his policies during his first administration, he's likely to continue this kind of strategy. Now, as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, I think that he's already been reported to have said that it's going to end the war in a day, because the Ukraine war of attrition has been dragging on far too long for both the American electorate and also for Americans, European ally countries, particularly their people. And also, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition, and American money is no substitute. So I think that and then also, he's likely to buy into the realist kind of notion that the United States should really move away from Ukraine and concentrate on China as its perceived main competitor. So I think that he's likely to end, he's already said he's going to end in a war in a day, Ukraine war in a day, by withdrawing support. And if that is the case, it's likely to take the form of a maybe a Korean War formula by freezing the situation on the ground without conceding any formal territorial recognition. If that is the case, weaken Russia if with territorial gains, however it is called, is likely to remain an existential threat to European neighbors, particularly in this bordering Russia. I think that this is going to again transform politics over Europe. Now, as far as Asia is concerned, well, again, along his transactional behavior, he's going to adopt a strategy focusing on Americans' primary interest. And of course, let's not forget, Trump is with his American first psyche and his tendency to belittle lesser powers is likely to rock a lot of countries, particularly in the global South. And then there is a rising solidarity, even though not in the same Cold War bloc, amongst the the global South nations. For example, in the latest BRICS summit in Russia. So I think that we're seeing a lot of changes there. And I think that he's likely to adopt a transactional attitude to countries including India, but also is focusing on the bigger picture. Be that as it may, it's going to be a major shock. And then, of course, one of the speaker's two primary initiatives is starting an unprecedented witch hunt, as well as a kind of extradition campaign against illegal immigrants, hunting them down and rallying them, regardless of their length of stay and children.
We
and then
we also have Irfan Nuruddin, the professor of the Indian politics in Georgetown University. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Very good evening to you in the United States. Are these conflicts a reason for which the voter perhaps tilted towards a change? And can we really expect more from Donald Trump in this regard in comparison to the outgoing president?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different dimensions to this. Obviously, Donald Trump's messaging, which for many voters was seen as very xenophobic, even racist on undocumented immigrants, resonated with a large number of Americans. We know from the exit polls that white Americans, especially white men, voted overwhelmingly for Mr. Trump. We know that white women, in spite of the abortion issue, went with Mr. Trump. So clearly that's a racial cleavage in American politics, but we also know that Latino men went for Mr. Trump as well. So, it's complicated, it's not unidimensional, but Andrew Leung did a masterful job summarizing sort of the sense of economic discontent and rising inequality. The one thing about foreign policy is that foreign policy has never been a major part of American elections, but what Trump has correctly tapped, I think, and when I say correctly, I mean that he understands the voters seem to resonate with that. I don't think it's the right policy for America, but what he has tapped is a sense that Americans, by and large, are less interested in playing the role of a global policeman or playing the role of global hegemon. They're very keen to extract America from what they see as unnecessary entanglements around the world, right? Most Americans probably can't find Ukraine on a map, right? They're probably hard-pressed to find Israel and Palestine on a map. What they really don't want is, and what Trump was able to resonate is saying, why are we paying for weapons and systems for this country over there? So, if you're going to think about who the biggest losers in this election were among, in the domestic level, arguably, women and undocumented immigrants, but at the international level, Ukraine. And so Trump can't solve the war in a day without getting Ukraine to essentially agree to let its territory be now conceded to Russia, which sets a really remarkable precedent internationally. The one great norm of international politics over the last 75 years has been that you cannot take another country's territory by force. It's a principle that India stands very strongly in favor of, right? This is the entire crux of India's long-term opposition to Pakistan's occupation of Kashmir. It's a point of contention with China in the northeast and in the Himalayas. So, but in Ukraine, that's the way you would have to solve this conflict. So whether you're talking about freezing borders, etc., the point is that the principle. Trump probably has far more sympathy for Mr. Putin in Russia than he does for Ukraine and is likely to use his influence
Mr. Nuruddin, Biden has been providing aid and arms to Ukraine, but would you say that support hasn't really helped to stop the war, but instead it's kept it going for close to almost 3 years? Kamala Harris didn't even promise to ensure a ceasefire. How can we expect things to change under Donald Trump?
That's a really fair question. I mean, look, to get Ukraine to actually be able to win the war probably involved a pretty costly war of attrition that would have dragged on quite longer without a much larger US or NATO involvement, which both US and NATO were unwilling to sort of commit troops on the ground for fear of escalating that into World War III. The American-led financial and economic sanctions against Russia had a bite, but they never quite had the full clampdown on the Russian economy that Americans hoped for. There was a lot of frustration, for instance, with India's role in maybe helping Russia evade some of those sanctions. So you're absolutely right to make the point that, look, this war of attrition was unlikely to end very soon. But the alternative to not give any support was essentially to allow Russia to violate international law and, conquer a sovereign country. And so very tough to know what the right call over there is, other than to say we'll support a partner, we'll oppose the principle, but hope that we can find peace. I don't think anyone expected the war to run quite as long as it has. And so we have gotten to the point where we probably need to figure out a negotiated settlement. My point is simply that in order to get there, it's unlikely that Russia is going to secede the territory that it has taken. So the only way we get there is for Ukraine to make the concession, and that is a pretty big change to international.
Right. Let me also ask a question to Mr. Andrew Leung there. Mr. Andrew, my question is about the global economy. Of course, could Trump's America First approach affect international trade agreements? What does this mean for global economy? He's already spoken about import tariff restrictions and so on. So what could it mean as far as global economy is concerned and international trade agreements as well?
Well, one of Trump's major policy initiatives is his conviction that tariffs are good and tariffs would solve a lot of problems. So he's already reported as saying is going to impose something like 60% or more or higher tariffs on China imports and also a significant a level of tariffs on other imports as well. He always believes that imports are bad and exports are good. This is kind of a false kind of understanding of what the division of labor and economics is all about. But with that as it may, it's likely to use that as an instrument to solve a lot of Americans' problems, because he believes that tariffs could even be a substitute for income tax. So he thinks that by imposing tariffs, American would get a lot of money, and then without understanding that a lot of the resulting increases are going to be borne by American consumers. But be that bad it as it may, because of the huge tariffs imposed on China imports and other imports, is going to roil the world international trade, disrupt supply and value chains, and it's going to shock the world economy. But then, of course, Trump is all for American first. Provided the American economy is doing well, I don't think it matters to him very much about what's happening in the rest of the world. That would take second consideration. But I think the world should be better prepared for these disruptions as a result of his administration.
Right. Of course, we are seeing, the disorder as far as the world is concerned. And, the Prime Minister, he's spoken with the Indian Prime Minister, spoken about peace. In the first conversation that he had with the Indian Prime Minister, he's spoken about working together on world peace. So, Mr. Nuruddin, take us through the priorities of Donald Trump when it comes to world peace. I mean, of course, he's spoken about ending the conflict in Ukraine. He said there wouldn't have been a war in Ukraine had he been the president, and he can end the wars in a single phone call, and we all know that's not possible. But what is his approach towards these conflicts around the world?
Well, I think the approach, as we both summarized, is sort of the notion that no one believes in Donald Trump's abilities more than Donald Trump, right? And so he's quite convinced that he's capable of, negotiating, of reaching deals. He's very low on specifics, and so it's very hard to really make intelligent analysis of someone who I'm not sure knows what he himself means by what he says. But let's think about it. We've got Ukraine. He's been very clear that he thinks that Russia has been unfairly demonized and that Putin has been unfairly demonized. He believes that he's got a good relationship with Putin. We now know that he's made at least 8 calls to Putin since he left office. So he's kept that channel going. So I'm sure that he thinks he can do that over there. The other big conflict, of course, is the ongoing conflict in Palestine, where Israel is engaged in what even local Israeli newspapers are now calling ethnic cleansing, or others call genocide. But again, over there, Trump's sympathies are likely to lie pretty heavily with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and with Israel, he's unapologetically a supporter and a fan of Netanyahu and of Israel. I don't think he's got any sympathy for the Palestinian people. So what does finding peace over there? Is he really going to talk Netanyahu into stopping the bombing? Or is he going to suggest, take the gloves off even more? There's no real solution over there. You'll recall in his first presidency, he sent his son to basically make peace in the Middle East, or his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, right? And that didn't really succeed either. So we don't quite know what's going over there. I think the third one is China, right? I mean, U.S. strategic policy is predicated on the notion that the next big strategic conflict is likely to be in the Indo-Pacific, in particular, over Taiwan. And the question over here is whether Trump sticks with that plan, recognizing China as the geopolitical challenge for the United States in a military way, or whether he begins to think that while I want to put tariffs on them, the last thing I want to do is get embroiled in a foreign conflict in Taiwan, right, halfway around the world, in a part of the world I don't really care about. Do we begin to make concessions to China? And in particular, is the precedent set in Ukraine one that China sees as being that, look, the United States at the end of the day might talk about defending its partners, but is not really going to, stick to the plan when push comes to shove. So I don't think there's a global coherent strategy. I think there's a piecemeal, transactional, bilateral, playbook. We know that a large part of the major brain trust of the first administration is unlikely to be back. None of them endorsed him the second time. It's not clear, therefore, who he's going to fill in the key cabinet positions, who he's going to have as ambassadors. So I think one thing, just to leave you with this, for 2025, you should expect that at least for the first half of it, there'll be very few confirmed senior people in large numbers of the posts in the federal government, simply because they're going to have to find people and they're going to have to work through the process.
Nuruddin and Leung, for getting us a perspective on several of these important issues as far as Trump's presidency is concerned. Thank you to both of you for joining us on this important discussion. You gave us a perspective on the impact of Trump's presidency globally, be it on geopolitical front or economic front, Divya, and how the leadership may perhaps change the course of the wars as well. Let's go straight across to Gauri Dwivedi, who's joining us from the United States. Gauri, of course, big day, and the excitement, I guess, prevails as far as, Trump's presidency is concerned. We just heard Kamala Harris there. She's conceded defeat, but she says she will continue the good fight. Take us through the key takeaways as far as Kamala Harris's speech is concerned, and a lot of conversation surrounding what really went wrong as far as Harris is concerned.
Indeed, this was a speech that her supporters had actually expected yesterday to take place, as in yesterday Eastern time, when the results had started coming in. There were a sea of her supporters at the Howard University yesterday, and they were hoping that given the fact that they all put in their heart and soul in a 100-day campaign, their leader would come out and say what they wanted to hear, that is words of encouragement. But nevertheless, those happened today, and Kamala Harris made a couple of very important observations and very important specific points that she made in her speech. One, of course, is that she's going to keep up the good fight. In fact, I said this earlier also, that she's young as far as politics goes. It's just her first serious stint at the highest office, and there's no reason to believe that she may not like to continue harboring these ambitions and working towards them going forward as well. Remember, America in the last 20 years has, there's been a major demographic change that has taken place. Around Ronald Reagan's time, 88% of America was white, and now that figure is about 67%. Who knows 10 years from now what that figure will be and what will be Kamala Harris's position there. At least that's what she would like to work towards. So that is a very clear indication she gave. The second very important fact that she said was that, you know what, I win or lose, I accept the election outcome. Something that was a clear dig at President-elect, which is Donald Trump, saying that he did not accept the results last time around, and even when the counting had just begun, even at that time, he had raised a major concern, saying that some sort of voter fraud is taking place. So that was a clear dig at President-elect Donald Trump. Now, the next 70 days will essentially be focused on two aspects. One, for the transition to take place. President Biden has pretty much been at the back, has taken a backstage since June, when he made way for Kamala Harris. So that is pretty much going to be the case for the next 70 days also. It's going to be status quo right now in Washington, D.C. And come 20th of January next year, this town turns red, deepest shade of red possible. And that is when Donald Trump will come with his team of advisors. I'm told about 5,000 people have to come in the new administration. 1,100 have been vetted and are ready. And this time around, his second administration, he's far more prepared. He knows the kind of advisors he wants, the kind of messaging he will focus on, the kind of big decisions that he'll take on, because now he's going to work towards legacy. He knows what DC has to offer. He's no more a new person here. He knows how this town works, how policy corridors work, and he's going to be far more prepared and working towards his legacy to ensure some of the big things that he's spoken about, he's able to pass through. What will help is a complete sweep in Senate, Supreme Court, and possibly Congress as well.
Right. And Gauri, like you mentioned, he's all hands at it. Of course, his first term when he spoke about building that wall between the border of the United States and Mexico. And again, here now his priority is to seal the border. He's spoken about closing that very porous southern border.
Indeed, the border is a very major priority for him. He's going to get back to building that. Illegal immigration is at the heart of Donald Trump's campaign. He said that in the last 4 years, 1 million immigrants have entered United States illegally. That is 250,000 annually. That's a huge number. And now deporting some of them. In fact, total illegal immigrants in the U.S. stands at 16 million. I beg your pardon, 10 million came to America in the last 4 years. The total number stands at 16 million. Deporting all of them is a very tough uphill task, because how do you go about doing that? Cost of doing that is about $88 to $90 billion in total. How much of the American taxpayer willing to pay that price is a billion-dollar question in itself. But the fact is, he will move towards it. He will ensure that some of the, he'll walk the talk, so to say. He said, I'm going to start the illegal deportation. He will be able to do so because the Senate will support him, the Congress will support him, the Supreme Court will support him. Whether the countries to whom these people may be sent to will be able to take them or not is a different question. But illegal immigration is one thing he's going to start. And the second thing, economy. The reason why Dow is responding so positively, the reason why Bitcoin is doing very well, the reason why gold has slumped is because everybody expects big changes in economy. It will start with tariffs, and I suggest it will be a lot more going forward, maybe supply chains moving to India. But the next few months will see some major changes that Donald Trump will unleash.